Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we are going to be continuing on with our C# tutorial series, and in this tutorial we are going to be taking a look at how we can actually catch and handle exceptions in our C# code. Alright, so we're going to use the example that we gave in the previous video where we're basically gonna go ahead and say, okay, well, we want to take two numbers and we want to divide them, and then first we'll do this without exception handling so you can see what happens when an exception is thrown, particularly when the divide by zero exception is thrown, and then I will show you how to catch and handle the exception so we can fail gracefully and continue the execution of the program without much fuss. All right? So, first things first, in our code here, we're going to have a method. And this method is going to allow us. Basically, this is going to be for gathering our input, okay? So we're going to say private void we're going to say gather input and divide. Okay, so here we go. We have our method, gather input and divide. And we're going to have static in there. I keep forgetting that. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we are going to say string input, or rather first, before we do the input, is console.write please enter a value, or rather, let's try this, where, okay, please enter the first number. Okay, and so now we can then say string input equals console.read line, and then we can say int, and this is going to be called value equals, and then here we're going to say, int, or rather, we can just say convert dot convert. Okay. We'll say toInt32. Input, like that. Now this convert to int32, this could also throw an exception, but we are not going to handle that exception for now because our demo, in our demo, we are going to only have, we are going to 100% ensure that we have a valid input. But if you want to look into the documentation and see what exceptions it throws and handle them yourself, by all means, go for it. I highly encourage you to do that so you can kind of get practice in actually doing what we're about to do. Okay, so we have our integer now. We have our value. Next, we're going to need our second value. And this is going to say console write line, or rather not the write line, but console.write. Please enter the second value. Like that. And then string input 2 equals console.readline int value 2 equals convert dot to int 32 input 2, like that. Then here's where we need to try to divide the two numbers. Now again, for this first instance, we are not going to do any exception handling. We're not going to catch the divide by 0 exception because I want to show you what happens when the exception is thrown and no code is there to catch it. All right. So now we can go ahead and do an int result equals, we can do value divided by value 2, like that. And we can say console.writeLine result the result is that. All right. So now, with that, we can go up to our main method. We can say gather input and divide, like that. Go ahead and save your code and run it. Okay, we have a build error. Let's see. Okay, let's try that again. I misspelled result. Alright, so let's enter a value. Let's say 10. And then the second value is going to be 0. And so now you can see we get a stack trace that says, we get a stack trace here in our debug console because an exception was found, an exception was thrown during the execution of our program. unhandled exception system dot divide by 0 exception. And this exception is thrown when you, well, divide by 0. Okay? And so with that particular method out of the way, and now that we've seen what happens without exception handling, let's go ahead and create another version of this method, but this method should catch and handle that exception. So let's go up to the main method. And I'm going to comment out this method call so we don't have any, so we don't get any more exceptions being thrown. Now, let's, above the one that doesn't have exception handling, no exception handling. With exception handling. All right. So here we're going to say, let's see, private static void gather gather inputs and divide with exception handling. Long method name, but that's okay. Okay, so now we're going to do something very similar to what we did below with the non-exception handling method, but you'll see what we'll do differently. Okay, so first things first is we can do a console.write. Please enter the first value. Okay, it's being a little bit annoying right now. Console.write. Please enter the first value. And then we can go string input equals console dot readline int value equals convert dot to int 32 input. Okay. And now let's go ahead and get the second value. So console.write please enter the second value. string input 2 equals console.readLine int value 2 equals convert.to int 32 input 2. Okay, so now that we have that all squared away, finally we can get to the exception handling. We just need to wrap the result calculation in what we call a try-catch block. Okay, so first we need int result with no value, or as it initially, and that's just so we can access the value of result after we get out of the try-catch. If the exception isn't caught, okay. Next, we need to say try, T-R-Y, opening, closing curly bracket, all right. Okay, so try, opening, closing bracket. There we go. And then we need a catch. So right below the try, we can have a catch. And this catch, we're going to have a opening and closing parenthesis and an opening and closing curly brackets. Okay? Inside of these parentheses, we are going to tell it what exception we want it to catch. In this case, we want it to catch a divide by 0 exception. So divide by divide by 0 exception. And then we can give it a name. E, for instance, you can just do EX, exception, E, whatever works best. But as long as you know what the variable is, or what the name for the exception object is going to be, that's fine. Okay? So next, inside of our try block, we're going to have the calculation or the method call or whatever the case may be that may throw the exception that we're trying to catch. In this case, result equals value divided by value 2, because that calculation could throw the divide by 0 exception. Now, inside of our catch block, we can go ahead and do, we can define what code we want to run once the exception is found. In this case, we are going to, have a console.writeLine. You can't divide by 0 Okay. Please enter a different set of inputs. Okay. And so now we're going to have the method call itself. And so we're going to say gather input and divide with exception handling. And so this is what we're doing right here is we're essentially saying, okay, well, you came across a divide by zero exception, give the user an error message telling them, hey, yeah, you can't divide by zero. Please put in different inputs. And then we're calling, we're having the method call itself to go back through and gather input and try to divide again. This is a concept that we call recursion, and it is an extremely useful concept when loops may not be the right solution for the job. And in this case, a loop might not be the kind of thing that you want here. So you may want to use recursion instead. So that's why I'm showing it to you. Okay? And again, with recursion, just a side note, you have to be very careful about where you use recursion because it could end up as an infinite loop if you have no way out of it. And in this case, we do. If the input is valid, it'll never call itself. So we're good. All right. And so that is our code to catch the exception. And once that's over, we then can actually output our results because we know our results are good at this point. And we can say console.write line, the result is results. And that's where right here, this instance right here is exactly why we defined result before initializing it in the try block. So that way we can access its value that is assigned inside the try block from outside of it. And so now, if we save our code and we do a Control F5, okay, we have an error here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so let's just give this a value here anyway. So there we go. Now we can try to run it. And so let's enter some values. 10. Okay. Yes. So we need to call the method in the main method. I apparently did not do that. So let's go ahead and go into the main method and gather input and with exception handling. There we go. And let's try to run it now. Okay. So now what it's going to do is ask us for input. So let's say 10. Ask us for a second value. We're going to say 0. And so you see then it went and gave us the error message, ran the method again, and we're back at the first value. So let's say 10 and 5. And so now we get the result is 2. And so that pretty much does it for how we can handle exceptions in C#. Feel free to look up the convert.toInt32 method, like I mentioned before, and see what exceptions it can throw, and see if you can prevent exceptions from being thrown when we're trying to convert our input to an integer. Thank you all so very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.